Hello, everybody.
Hello,
We're starting the
everybody.
recording now. Welcome, welcome. We today are talking about Geraldine Brooks's 2022 novel Horse, and I've started the recording immediately because we started talking about the book before the recording started, and I want to record all of it for posterity. Before we start properly, I am saying on the record that Carol with an E is unable to come today. She says hello to everybody, and she's sad that she wasn't able to come. She's volunteering today at the hospital, and I needed proof of me telling everybody that in the recording so that she
Okay,
doesn't get mad at me for
so
not having passed it along. So I've passed
so
that along.
sorry. Say hello to Carol E from Carol without an E.
Done. And she will receive all of these messages a second time when she watches the recording. But that's the first thing. The second thing is hello, everybody. Nice to see your faces. And then the third thing is that Roseanne was starting to talk about the beginning of the book just as Rona was coming in, and I didn't want to miss any of it for posterity because I liked, again, where it was I liked that because I can feel already that that's going to lead us into discussion. So I didn't want to cut it off. So without further ado, the floor to you, Roseanne. Go ahead.
Opened that book and I said, okay. And I read the first paragraph, the very first paragraph. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. What did she give us here? I'm in an engineering program. I'm in a I'm at the MIT. I'm at McGill studying doctorship. I can't understand a thing. This I don't understand a thing. How could anybody? How did they publish this? And then I said, oh God, don't tell me I have to go through this. And then I went the next paragraph and going, oh, thank God.
So I'll interrupt
Exactly what
here and actually read the opening lines of the book, which is from Theo's perspective. And the opening lines are: the deceptively reductive forms of the artist's work belie the density of meaning forged by a bifurcated existence. These glyphs and ideograms signal to us from the crossroads freedom and slavery, white and black, rural and urban. And then this next paragraph starts: no, nope, that wouldn't do. It reeked of PhD. This was meant to be read by normal people. And we get into more of Theo's voice.
it was very funny.
So you were worried.
I would have liked to know what he was originally saying because I had no idea. But then I would have had to sit with the dictionary for 2 hours.
I agree with Roseanne 100%. I only got the book, it was on hold for about a month in the library here, and they have a lot of copies. I could not believe the people that wanted to read this book. I don't know who, where, and it's 2022, right, Katie?
Yeah.
So I figured, geez, when am I gonna? I called the library. They said, forget it. You're never gonna get it. I figured, all right, for $15, I have to buy it on my Kindle because it's $25 at Indigo. And by luck, I think on Wednesday or Thursday, the library notified me they got it. So I ran over. And like you, Roseanne, I opened the book. I said, oh my God, how am I going to read this book? This is not an easy read. 100%, Roseanne. I said, I've got to read it. I waited so long. It's for the book club. And I just plowed through, and about more like less than a half or a quarter through, I really started getting into it, and I read it, I swear, all day. I said to everybody, I'm not going out of the house Sunday. I have to finish this book. And I didn't go out of the house, but it was not a chore. I couldn't put it down. It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So many nuances, racism, and all things, and interesting stories about the horse. And I just thought it was beautifully, beautifully written. And it was just a lovely, lovely book. Did you like it, Roseanne?
I loved it.
Yeah.
And at first I was a little upset that they kept switching from person to person to person because I can't remember.
Yes,
But then I was happy. Then I was happy because it wasn't so it like wasn't like 25,000 pages of one thing. It was just like a
Right.
thing. So you like, it was okay. I was able to follow and
And
remember what happened in the last time.
how clever was it that you were actually witnessing in the real time in the 1800s
Right.
what went on, and how the 2019 was actually dealing with what happened at that time? I thought that was very, very clever. I don't think I've ever read a book before that everything was happening like in real time, like old time. It goes back and forth, but this really,
You
you know what
did.
I'm saying?
I can tell you
I
did
did.
because she did something similar with People of the Book, which we read ages ago.
I wasn't there. I never read
Shush,
that book.
you, of
Many
course you
years ago.
must have been.
No,
I
no,
never read the book either.
People of the
no,
Book? We didn't read People of
No,
the Book together?
no,
no.
no.
Which one?
Maybe what
Okay then. Never
I
mind.
would read.
I
Never
know it's
mind then.
about
Maybe with
Haguda
another
because
group,
they talk
or
about it at
before
the end.
we joined.
It's about a
But I
Haguda, that right? It's about a Haguda that from Spain or something. Because I saw it
Sarajevo.
and I was still looking to see
I
what other
never
books
read
maybe
it.
I've read, and I've never read any of her books.
No, me
Hmm.
neither. Was it similar to this, Katie, or does
Well,
another writer?
so it is similar in that it follows, so the way that horse follows a thing, like the life of well, theoretically, right? It follows the lifespan of two things. Lexington's skeleton and the painting of
Right,
Lexington, right?
right.
And so then we try and follow, we're sort of like it's kind of a mystery that Jess and Theo are working on, or they're mysteries that sort of coincide. And then we have the stories from the past, right? The 1850s. Then we have the stories of Jarrett. And then like as time goes on, then with Martha Jackson and like Thomas Scott stuff in between there too. And then we find out how the skeleton came to be where it came to be, and how the painting kind of came to be where it came to be. There's like a blank spot for sure especially with the painting of how it got there, but we can fill in the blanks there. Anyway, the People of the Book similarly traces the life of this. Tell me how to pronounce it properly.
Haguda.
Haguda, that is so it's illuminated, and it's found, so it's which is to say illustrated, right? So it's the creation of this, and it follows it through the years and how it survived, sort of like and like where it was hidden in various times, like during the Holocaust, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like from the inception of it, like I think it starts, I can't remember because it has been a long time.
50,
I want to say in
yeah,
Turkey.
16th century or something.
Yeah, so it starts
16th
and then
century.
like through like the Muslim world, through and like it talks a lot about the intersections of religions, as well as then like the reality of war and the way that different people sort of worked together to save not just the Haggadah, but also like people involved in its protection. Anyway, but it has multiple different perspectives. It doesn't, it, the only times that it goes back to someone's perspective is in the present of like the primary narrator. Whereas this one, I liked one of the things that I liked about it, and I think that a lot of people will find an easier time with, and because I know not everyone likes shifting perspectives, shifting narrators, is that there are a limited number of narrators here, and that
Mhm.
each time the narration changes, then it says so at the very beginning of the chapter, and then it
Right.
says so also at the top of each page of that
Easy to
chapter.
follow.
Yeah. Sorry, Carol, I kind of railroaded the conversation by answering a question, but I want to give you a chance too to talk about your thoughts on the book.
Horse.
Yeah.
What a book. I thought it's an emotional ride through the centuries we've threaded with a discarded painting and a skeleton in the attic. So I thought the stories of people were interlaced to each other, eliminating all the others, just like an orchestra. An orchestra, right? Each instrument has their part, plays its part, and the melodies and the harmonies echoing each one and produce a symphony. So, but really,
It's a lovely analogy.
analogy.
Yeah,
Okay, now,
good one.
great book. I thought it was a good book. The different themes, and now Jarrett. Jarrett is the one who is, we see him in every chapter, right? Warford's Jarrett, Ten Brooks, Jarrett, and everything else. I thought two things. One of the best quotes that Jarrett says is about the horse and the personality of a horse, and he says something like, where are they? Is here? Oh yeah, it's in page on 44, where he tells the artist Thomas Scott, and he says he take his own time to think for himself. Not all jockeys can see why a horse can be that way. So I think that how he does on the track, see how his tail swings side to side. He knows how to use his self, but he don't always engage that big hind end when he's in a race. He's telling Scott that a horse has a personality of its own.
Mhm.
And I think this artist captures this bond in his painting, according to the book, in his painting. And
And in his diary entries, right?
then he says later, I think when he learns to read, that how words can hurt and humans can betray each other with words. But a pat on a horse will give you back his infection. In other words, in animals, this Lexington would not betray Jarrett. He will give his affection as long as he gives his affection back. So I thought all these themes, but I think really, as far as racism is, well, I'm not sure about the shooting. Maybe it was too much. On the other hand, there's another where when yes, where, okay, just one more thing. Now, Theo's thesis. Now, he says that true Africans by white artists existed. White artists, that no portraits of white artists couldn't see past their own ingrate stereotypes of blackness. And this was illuminated by the shooting of by a white policeman. Maybe it was a little too much for me.
There were a lot of parallels, right? Between the
Yeah,
past and the present and the racism experienced, obviously, in both. This is one of the things that Geraldine Brooks has said in interviews was that initially, when she wanted to write the book, she wasn't initially she wasn't thinking about having a present sort of thread. But because of the time that it was happening in, and because an inevitability of the story of Lexington was going to be also about the black trainers, black jockeys in that era. And she knew that it had to have something to do with, it had to be not just about racing, it had to be about race as well. And she didn't see, uh, she felt like she couldn't not talk about the continuing racial issues that we experience in
It
the
was
present.
okay. That I agree with her, and the fact that in New York, I went to visit a friend who worked in a factory. I got on the elevator, and then some purelator guy or some person came, a black gentleman, and he came to get on the elevator, and he just stood there, and I'm going, "Are you going up?" I was like, "Wasn't going down." He says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why don't you get on the elevator?" So he gets on the elevator, and then as we're going up the elevator, he says, "You know, you're not from New York, are you?" And I said, "No." why do you ask? He says, because you would never have asked me to get on the elevator if you if you were a New Yorker. And so that's why I didn't get on the elevator, because I didn't feel like you telling me not to. And I found
Wow.
that very interesting. But and the other thing is, I was in Australia, and I'm going to tell you that now it's true. It's 1988. I don't know what it's like today, but I would imagine it's the same thing. You very rarely see any black people around. I don't think that part was very weird, because his friends kept saying to him, here he had his English accent, and he was he was thought, he never even realized that he should never have tried to help the woman. But I don't think he had an experience, because it is today. A teacher in my school, she was from Holland. She was black as, and she was a member of the not member of the royal family, a very good friend of the royal family, because her father was with the East Indian Company. And when her son came to visit her at 20 years old, and took her car, or whatever, she said to him, "Don't you even think of moving your hands anywhere if the cops stop you," and which they will, because you're driving my car, and it's new.
Well,
And so we have it here. We do.
of course we do.
And so,
That's,
It's
I
still
think
going
that it
on. It's
is
still
a
going
very
on.
normal thing for
yes, it is.
every
We don't
Black
realize it because we're
family
white.
to like be teaching their kids
That's right.
always from the beginning. It's just like
Exactly.
when police, like, it's an awareness of the reality of what it
That's right.
is to live
That's right.
without white skin.
That's right. And we
But
don't understand that. And he didn't either, because Australia, is not so well, was not in the 80s very welcoming to anybody, any immigrant. You didn't see anybody. Now I hear this more. It's more. There's more. But black, I don't know about that, because he didn't have. It's very
Are you talking about Theo?
Theo. Yeah. The thing is,
So
the
this
friends
doesn't
kept.
take place in Australia, right? He did live in Australia for a period of time when he
That's
was
right.
younger, but I wouldn't say that Theo didn't experience racism. He talks about in his chapters, he talks
Exactly.
about his experience of racism at an elite
Yeah,
British
but that's at a
school.
school. That's
And
at
he
a
talks
school.
about it as well in the States, but this is one of the things that his other Black friends point out to him, his other American Black
Yeah.
friends. So, uh, Theo, our art historian in the present in 2019, that's our present timeline.
well, let's look at
He's an
the.
art historian and he grew up the son of diplomats. So again, quite a lot of privilege here. His
Exactly.
father was American, his mother is Nigerian, and this is his reality that he grew up, and he grew up playing polo, but he was the only Black guy on the team, and one of the reasons why he quit playing was because of the racism experienced.
That's not the
However,
same thing, though. What we're talking about, the racism is one thing, but police, and white attitude towards black kids at night. I mean,
well, in the same way
express
that
it's a
in the same
problem.
way that this gets brought up again throughout the book, right? At one point, at the beginning of the book, we have Theo finding this painting that his neighbor, who he thinks is racist because she's never had any sort of desire, she's always been very rude to him. She and her husband were always very rude to him. Um, and at one point, she's hauling things out of their house, and he goes to help her because that's who he is. It's like he is community minded, help your neighbor and do these things. And he knows that she doesn't like him. And it's like, but he sees her struggling. So he goes and he helps. And then once they bring out this chair or ottoman or whatever it is to the curb to go with everything else, there's a sign that says free. And she just kind of gestures. She's like, take whatever you want. And he doesn't think he's going to be remotely interested, but he, again, was raised to be polite and da 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 da. So he goes to give a cursory look, and there he finds this painting of a horse, which is how we kind of begin our story.
And I have
Now,
to tell you that brought tears to my eyes.
mhm,
The only time that I was very emotional was when she went to the museum at the end. There was in memory of Theo blah blah Fordham, and how did you do this? And it was from the owner, and I'm like, what? That didn't make sense. And then the next line was, it was what they call? I'm having a senior moment. It was you couldn't
It
have the
was him.
sale
Yes.
unless you did it. It was,
Yeah.
unless you had this.
Contingent on the sale.
That's
Yeah.
right. And here was this woman who did, I mean, I said, oh my God, what could have been, what should have been, whatever,
Well,
Jesus.
and this is what often comes, like, this is what comes out, is drawn out of the story a lot of the different times, right? Like, uh, so anyway, so Theo has this painting restored, find out because he's intrigued by it. He's an art historian. He feels like he recognizes as something like that it's old and whatever. And he finds out eventually that this painting was created by Thomas J. Scott and that it is of Lexington. And when he finds out how much it's worth, thousands and thousands of dollars, he says to his now girlfriend, Jess, our bones lady, that he's going to give it back to the owner. She says, but no one would do that. You should do it. And he says, and she's racist and she's these things. And he says, just because she doesn't behave as she should doesn't mean that I shouldn't behave in a way that I know that is right. And that is the core of Theo, I find. That is the core of his character, which is a beautiful kind of thread woven through. It's like all the different moments that he experiences racism, that like, and even like recounting it and the ways that he reacts to it is the way one should react to it, which is to say that he tempers his reactions and he responds
And it
instead
cost
of,
him his life, Kath. It cost him his life because he went to help that black woman and
because he still does what he knows to be right. Now, this is another thing, right? So in the writing of this book, Geraldine Brooks's own husband died. And I wonder if Tony Horowitz hadn't died, if Theo might have lived. I
Oh,
mean,
really?
Theo dying and Jarrett living offer a nice counterpoint kind of in the novel as well, because we have Jarrett who's born into slavery, who, like, you guys noticed, right? That when it's his chapters, then we have Warfield's Jarrett, we have Ten Broke's Jarrett, we have, what's the other one? I can't remember.
Belongs to
Alexander's
everybody.
Jarrett.
It belongs to
Bef
everybody.
before like before his chapter is Jarrett Lewis, where he finally does take his father, a free man's last name. Um, but he's always someone's. There's always that element of ownership. So we have Jarrett who lives through like most of his life in slavery, and then we have who has a happy ending, and then we have Theo who lives most of his life in privilege with obviously caveats, who then his life ends because of the realities of the world that we live in too. Lifting up a phone.
Yes,
That
it's
was
in,
shocking to me that she killed off
Yeah.
Theo.
But
That was a
I
real
wonder if he would have lived because again,
oh,
she must have been experiencing so much grief. And that really
oh,
also brought alive like Jess's experience in
that's
the
interesting.
aftermath as well.
You think that affected the writing of the book and she changed it?
I mean,
It
I
could
don't
be.
know. I couldn't find it in
Yeah.
an interview. The one interview that I saw
Horse.
that might have mentioned it was under a paylock, and so I couldn't read it.
Oh,
Sorry,
it
Carol, you were saying?
it was very interesting. Again, number one, after the shooting, his friend Daniel comes to see Jess and in a way blames her for this happened. She should have told him what about what's happening. She should told
Please.
him that he's black. He has to be careful.
It-
Something to this. That's very interesting. But the next thing is really more interesting. When the white policeman, the one who shot him, when he finds out that she's a scholar, Yale, and intelligent, he comes to the house, sees all these books,
And that his father was a veteran and a warrior.
yeah.
war. Yes. And his father was a diplomat, and it
And an
seems
American. that was a big thing too,
Mm.
right? Oh, well, he was Nigerian, he was an immigrant, and he was
I mean,
probably into,
yes,
and it's like,
and the way they describe his face is like, wow, does he feel,
oh, how are we gonna spin this then?
He
you
still got
know,
the police, but the policeman still got off with it. I mean, that's it. I mean, went on with his life and there was no consequences.
well,
No
look at the stereotypes today. A black hoodie, a
Mhm.
black hoodie.
Why
These were,
would he go like why would he go running in a black hoodie at
Yeah.
night if he's not a bad guy, basically? And it's like these again, things that white people don't really have to think about.
You know what I
that's
didn't like though, just to stop, I found it was odd that the woman he is supposedly assaulted very conveniently lost her memory and couldn't say something like, I slipped, I fell, and that I
But
found that
she
that
didn't
little bit
fall.
was
She didn't fall. She probably was attacked.
We don't know.
by him.
We don't know. We
No,
don't know because she
no,
wasn't
no,
Oh, I
not
around.
by
never
That's
him.
very
got
Of
that
common.
course,
impression.
of course not by him. Hi,
I never got,
Heidi. We've
he
already
attacked her.
started.
No, it's
but in
true.
No, I don't think so.
We don't know what happened.
We
And
don't
that
know.
little bit with that woman who he was
Yeah,
helping, it's very tiny. So this is honestly there I might have a few tiny little criticisms of the book,
that's it.
but the other thing too is that like from the time that Theo, excuse me, from the time that Theo dies and the end of the book, like there's like this much time. Like what a few weeks
Right,
pass, right?
Yeah.
right.
So we have a few different themes that go through, like people's relationships with animals, something that Carol was talking about earlier. She was talking about that passage of like the ways that people are dishonest and animals aren't. Like this is something that we feel as well with the relationship with the dog, not just with Lexington, right? The real importance of these relationships between people and animals. Um, but it's a really, really brief period that before she leaves. And we don't really find out, like, even like we have the journalist who comes by who interviews her, Jess, and who writes up the story about Theo's killing. And
Right.
she says what's going to happen. It does happen. There's a protest. Then there's another protest. In a way, this like really short attention span of these horrific things that
Yeah.
happen in our
So
world
the
in
ending was like
but
too
but at
packed.
the same time it's true to life, right? Like this stuff happens like just like what's happening in LA right now, what's
Yeah.
happening like just like it's so fast and we are just like it's like this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Like we don't have the names of every single person who has been unlawfully like like wrongly accused, shot, like these things, there are too many of them to process. So in a way, they become a blur. And in a way, that's what I see reflected as well in the ending of the book. And then it goes right into COVID, right? This is
Yeah,
the
right,
ending of the book.
and
It's just
on the
like, and
plane.
they're about to get on the plane and and we know again, like these parts that we get to fill in. I have a question for everybody. First of all, hi Heidi. Hi Heidi, welcome. Sorry, we've already do you want to talk a little? Did you get a chance to read the book? Did you want to talk about it or did you?
Yes, I read the book. I enjoyed it. Um, Certain things I enjoyed more than others,
Mhm.
but it was well written. I found the change it from time and persons this time quite easy to do.
Good.
And it gave me a little break from my Anna Karenina because I read that in between. And yeah, I liked it quite a bit, but there's certain things that I thought, well, were not maybe quite correct. What I really liked,
Like what?
well, I found the relationship sometimes between the white slave owners and the slaves. I don't think she sort of sometimes characterized it better than I think it was.
Well, she says that because of Jarrett's position as well, because of because of his relationship with Lexington, that he also by and large had a
Of a
different.
privilege is possible, but I found that a bit far-fetched, maybe.
Mhm.
Well, I found it very because prior the guy that really treated him poorly, the other trainer, was married to a black.
Ten broke? No.
He's frozen.
Oh, Roseanne's frozen.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, okay. Let's talk about, okay, I have a question for everybody. Roseanne, while you're frozen. What did you think about the inclusion of perspectives by Thomas J. Scott and Martha? What did you think about those? So Martha is the art dealer.
Art dealer in the 50s.
Martha Jackson, I couldn't remember her last name. Yeah. So with her sort of rediscovery of the painting, and this is for those of you, if you read the afterword, then it's one of the things that is sort of follows the sort of timeline. Like a lot of this, again, fictionalized. A lot of the story is fictionalized. Jarrett didn't actually exist. Like his character is created, um, but it's drawn on and drawn from different accounts. That's how Geraldine Brooks crafted him. Um, Martha Jackson was a true historical figure, and it's true also that this painting of Lexington was part of her donation to the Smithsonian. And it did not, like, it was like one of these things just doesn't belong in terms of her collection that she donated, because most of her collection was more sort of modern for the time, was
Modernistic.
more experimental. And this was a very classical piece. So then, uh, while her mother was an equestrian who did die from falling off a horse, so that's where Geraldine Brooks sort of created this idea of why she would have had this painting in her collection. But what did you think about their voices? Like, did you?
Why did Mellon, what's his first name up here? Why did he not want the painting and keep her on hold for so many months? I don't, he's a real figure, right? Mellon, like
Yeah,
that's a real, so
I think
what,
so. And I feel like I read at one point too that he did have possession, like that was part of it, that he had possession of the painting for a time. And this was, um, I felt, well, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about
Okay,
that section of the story?
I think, oh, my
Go
turn?
ahead, Carol.
Okay, two minds. Very hard to read Martha Jackson. In a way, she's a dealer. She wants to
right,
sell her paintings to the point where this is a true story, apparently, where she trades she takes two paintings and gives a sports car to Pollock Jackson.
Mm.
right, Pollock, yeah.
And it's true that she knows that he's a drunkard. And I think this is true that he's killed in a car crash.
Yeah, he did die in the car.
Yeah,
Well, anyway, he he does have a car crash. I'm not sure. I think it's true if you read about
Yep.
Pollock. Next is, on the other hand, does she really want her helper maid? What's her name?
Annie.
Annie.
yeah.
Now, Annie needs money. Does she really want to help her to sell the painting and give her the money? Or does she know that she's going to get money for it? Or I don't know. Is she really altruistic? Or is she a dealer and wants money for her studio.
Well,
That's what.
the character that Geraldine Brooks draws is definitely like she seems like a pretty decent person, this Martha Jackson that is created again fictionally, but she because of her relationship with Lee as well, that's her connection to Pollock in this story, and she brings it up to Lee first. Of like, is this a terrible idea? Like this, I know he likes the car and I want his paintings, and she wants two paintings so that she can keep one. She's not just a dealer. Like she also loves, clearly she loves art. Like that's her story in these chapters as well, right? So, um,
Do you know what they're worth, these Pollock's
yeah,
paintings today?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
exactly.
But also like the way that her character looks at, sorry, one sec. Sorry. I'm not sure if you guys could hear all of that too. But part of this too is that the way that she talks about Annie is again like she doesn't seem Martha's not a bad person about this. Like she does recognize, of course, that she would like to make a profit, but she's not approaching it as a like she's also still at the time of the telling of this story, she's successful, but not wildly successful. Um, but as to Melon, his inclusion, I mean, I read that as like because the Rona was asking why we thought that Melon had the painting for so long if he wasn't going to buy it. And I think that it was more entitled sort of rich white guy stuff. So he had it and he liked it and he kind of wanted it, but he was stringing her along because again, power. He has more power than she does.
Oh,
So what is she going
uh-huh.
to do about it? And then he leaves the country after saying that he would
Yeah,
keep it
yeah,
for a couple of weeks.
right.
Like that's why I think it was to illustrate the power dynamic and also maybe
Ah,
to just follow the historical trail of the painting where Mellon apparently had it for a little while. I'm
mhm.
not sure. I didn't read anything about that. It's again like these kind of like sometimes throughout the book, and I think that it could be just being caught up in the interestingness of the details, right? But they maybe didn't all need to be included. But at the same time, they're so interesting that why wouldn't you include them? Because they're neat, you know?
I kept wondering what is true and what isn't true. Like what is historically true and what is fiction. Like she went from the what actually happened or what people think happened to maybe what she made up. It was difficult did this really happen? You know, was it really true? If we look it up, will we find that this happened? She sort of like melded the two, I found in many,
Yeah.
many, many instances.
Well, this was when I feel like I bring this up a lot because I really liked the description that Marie Benedict said of her writing biographical fiction. I think it's true also with historical fiction in general, which is that the idea of using certain historical facts as pillars to hold up the narrative that is
That's
created.
what
And
she
then
did.
there's all this other room for sort of the creation of the story, of the fictional kind of storyline of how, we got from A to B, from B to C, etc. I read one interview that was talking about how, or maybe it was an interview and it was just a review, talking about how Thomas J. Scott's diary entries, so this is the artist, his diary entries, how it fulfilled this kind of narrative plot of Jarrett and Lexington's relationship with each other. And I kind of disagree. I mean, I get in a way I understood like having the Thomas J. Scott bits included more for historical context and it was more for like the realities of this living during the Civil War because his painterly experience to me, I don't know, it didn't add that much. I guess maybe we were just supposed to care about another character. But I didn't really care that much about him.
About Scott. You didn't care about Scott.
No, I didn't care
The-
about him so much.
Yes, talk about, is it true or not? There at the end of the book, it says afterward. A quote by Mark Twain: fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities, truth isn't. And I thought it's very interesting. The painter, very interesting character. Again, at first he made some snide remarks about him being black, and then when Jared talks about the horse and how the relationship, he gets into the horse and he starts painting and he asks Jared to help him. Then they have a pretty good relationship.
Yeah,
So
the tension between Scott and Jarrett is when Scott comes from the north, right? And so he's feeling out Jarrett's feelings about basically running away because he's like, you should be free. But it's like, again, this blindness of white people and black experience, right? Saying like, oh yeah, so like, why wouldn't you just run away? And it's like, are you crazy even talking to me about this? You are crazy even talking to me about this, is Jared's thought. It's just like, this is no, no. Like you have no idea the reality that I live in, even as like again, a privileged slave with special skills, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's just I feel like they get more of a kind of even footing when Scott just stops trying to basically Karen Jarrett.
You know
What's
what
that, Rhoda?
surprised me? What surprised me was Ken Brooks Jarrett. At one point, he actually turned against Jarrett, right? He turned against Jarrett there with the sale of the horse, and he said, you know, and he brought him with him to take care of the horse, and he ended up not taking care of the horse and living in squalor and so on. I found that was disappointing to me. He was supposed to be such a nice
Are you
guy.
talking about when he goes to train, like when Lexington goes to
Yes,
the estate
yes.
to get trained? Yeah, and then
He
Jared is
turned
supposed to be
against him.
apprenticed to this other
Right.
trainer.
Like all of a sudden on a dime, he just turned against him. He was, you know,
I
he was
feel
at
like
the
that was
start.
more, that was less. I didn't feel like Tenbrook really turned against Jarrett until the end of their time together. But I feel like Tenbrook is a really interesting character that's basically acts in complete self-interest throughout.
Yeah, yeah.
Like in
The
a
money,
way,
the money.
yeah, it's all about the money, right? Like in a way, his own ego even is sublimated there because he will bet against himself,
Yeah,
against his own
that he bet
horse,
on the other horse, absolutely. And
if
did you,
to
and
be
also I
guaranteed a
noticed
win, and he will,
he died penniless.
yeah,
Did you, that really got, you know,
yeah,
he was this wonderful, he was friends with the king and the queen and blah, blah, blah. And
yeah.
he ended up dying penniless. And I
And
said,
he
good.
will manufacture his own downfall or like visual, right? Like a public downfall in that like his horse will lose in this popularity
Exactly.
contest. He will manufacture it to protect his investment.
Yeah,
Like
that he
that's,
was a
yeah.
very
So
interesting character, I
pretty
found.
interesting, especially
Very.
in how little really that we know about him. And also, I thought he was drawn in a quite a sympathetic way by and large. Like he wasn't portrayed as evil. He
Right,
wasn't,
right.
while at the same time,
He was
he
terrible.
was
Yeah,
not necessarily good. But
exactly.
yeah, yeah. But that period of time when Lexington and Jarrett are like, so Jarrett is supposed to be apprenticed under this other trainer, and that other trainer is how he's like, no, nothing to do with you, the white
Terrible.
trainer. And so like you can go work like in a way that gives us this little glimpse of like what happens like when like, oh, so your privileges are taken away, but it's still, again, not as bad as it could potentially be. But this is more of a sort of a good a good expectation of like for most
Right.
enslaved peoples then, which then gets again nullified. Now, Jarrett operates under this idea, even though he's learned to read and to write by this point, and he sends word to Ten Broek about what's going on. But Jarrett is under the impression that Ten Broek doesn't know what's going on. And then at the end of their time together, then Ten Broek is like, I always know what's going on, blah, 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 blah.
Thank you.
And then that also, like, that kind of begs the question, like, how did this happen? And then, too, that time that he's there, that they're there, um, in New Orleans, right? No. Where do they go? Is that when they're in Kentucky? Anyway,
Yeah.
that period of time when Lexington is under the purview of this white trainer, and then he gets loose and gorges himself on all the food, right?
And get sick.
That's what the theory then that gets connected to his blindness
That's
of
right.
how that actually came about.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
I loved how Geraldine Brooks tied all of these little elements together. I read this review talking about how one reviewer was talking about how they thought the present depictions of racism were a little bit clunky. And I know that I've heard from a few of you about, you know, sort of the questions that we may have about the shooting, about the way that one of, like, of Theo's friend, saying, like, basically putting the blame on Jess,
On-
not for not for anything really other than being white, right? It's that if this idea, this thought that if Theo had been with an American black woman, then it would have been a constant reminder. It wouldn't have been a thoughtful reminder of like, you have to be careful, you have to be careful going out, you have to be careful going out, so much as it is just like, it's just the lived reality of it. Now, I think that can, a lot of that I thought that was seemed very true. That felt very um sincere and resonant because again, the ways that we experience grief, like you have someone in front of you that you can be mad at. You can't like as opposed to the system and or this police officer who is not in front of you and who has a different power. Like this is like you can be, and also you're just angry that this absolutely senseless thing happened. Like, of course you're gonna blame. Of course you're gonna like that to me seemed very kind of true to life. Um, yeah, I also really liked the book. My I grew up, my dad worked at a racetrack, a horse racetrack, so I grew up with a lot of horses. And
Wow.
um and I was very, very young when he switched jobs. I think that I was maybe 4 or 5, but I still was like I was like I get so invested in the books that I read sometimes where I was like, well, maybe I'll learn how to do horseback riding. Maybe that's something I'll get into now. I get very into this idea, the ideas of these things. And another interesting thing that I found while reading about it was Geraldine Brooks does ride horses. She is into horses, but she didn't get into riding till she was in her 50s.
Well, we all read Black Beauty. The book Black Beauty was
I did many years ago.
many years ago. I have to reread it. It was a beautiful book.
Mm.
Getting back to Ten Broek, his relationship with Jared. Well, I think it wasn't. I don't think he cared for Jared, but he needed him for this horse.
I don't think Ted Broke cared for anybody.
Anybody, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Very,
He didn't care for anybody,
very dislikable character. I couldn't figure
but
him
especially.
out. Sometimes I loved him, and sometimes I thought he was terrible. Yeah.
Remember, there was point he was going to get a trainer and get rid of Jared. And at that point, he said, oh, the horse is really wild. The only one
Yeah.
who could train him is Jared. Not that he cared for Jared. He knew without Jared, there's no way he could handle
Yeah,
the horse.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
completely self-interested, I thought. It's not for
That's
his
true.
feeling.
That's true.
And Jared didn't care for Brooke, but somehow they needed each other. And you could see in so many ways where he manipulated Harry to sell the Lexington, quoting this whatever crazy rule that
Well, it's
Negroes
Ten
are not
Broken Viley, right? It was Viley who pointed out the language.
violent.
Hmm.
And then when he's dying, he admits to Jared, I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
Viley saying to Jarrett, yeah.
there. You know what? I'm so sorry. I manipulated. All of a sudden he's sorry. What's really interesting is that Jared ends up saving Scott. I think it's all fictionalist
Yeah.
because so I thought how
And
again.
Viley, right? He saves Viley too. Him saving
And all the
Scott, that's
horses, and the
yeah.
horses, all the horses in that was like, I don't know.
Yeah. So that part of the story, fiction, but
Fiction.
true is that the horses ended up, yeah, moving to Illinois
Yeah.
um during that period in the Civil War.
That's right.
Well, the Kentucky Derby is after Lexington. My son knows everything about racehorses. He told me there's a
Oh,
horse called Secretariat, and he was the best
Secretariat.
horse. Secretariat. And
Secretariat, right.
Secretariat.
yeah. Well, he knows everything about it. Yeah. So,
Did he read the
yes.
book? He should read the book.
I'm just
Well,
curious where the name Preakness comes from. Because was it the horse Preakness or is the
Yeah.
racetrack with Preakness? Or was
Yeah,
the
it was after the horse, the Preakness, the
That's
race
right.
was
Interesting. So
named after Preakness. Yeah, the horse.
there was a racetrack in Montreal, Blue Bonnet. Remember Blue Bonnets in
No.
Montreal? And my father sometimes used to go there just for relaxing. He made a bet for $2. I actually went to a race, and it was really exciting. I made a bet for $2, made nothing, but I found it's a really exciting sport because you don't know what's happening. You don't know people made like, I don't know, bets thousands of dollars, and there and my son told me the whole program, and you make a tick. It's a whole to do with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I love
Heidi,
that's what I
sorry.
love. Yeah.
Heidi, what are your thoughts?
Well, I found there were too many people in that book, sort of going from one to another. I was mostly interested really in the horses, to be quite honest. And of course, I was very interested. I know nothing about racing horses, nothing. My father had a horse, but it was mostly during the war because he was a vet and he took care of the horses when the Germans were in Poland, because they used a lot of them. So I only know about horses. And since my father was a vet, I was always interested in horses. So I really was, my heart was always with Lexington, I mean, there he was, and let's have him have a good life. And
I think you're not alone. And this is I'm interrupting. I apologize. I'm interrupting, but I'm interrupting for a reason. So one of the things that Geraldine Brooks said as well was one of the reasons why she wanted to tell this story. Okay, so she went to this lunch or a dinner or something after she wrote Caleb's Crossing, which I think is her third novel anyway. But someone was talking to her about a story that they thought she should write about this girl, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, oh, that's a little too close to the Caleb's Crossing book that I just wrote. But at the other end of the table was a conversation that was taking place about Lexington's bones that had just been sort of like brought anyway, that were on display at the Kentucky Museum of the Horse or something, and like a little bit of the story about how they had been lost and how Lexington had become then horse, that had become then locked in the attic or lost in the attic, whatever. And uh, one of the reasons why she wanted to tell the story, though, too, was because knowing the reality for so many racehorses, and she refers to a racehorse in Australia whose name I forget. It was two words, but anyway, who had a bad life, ended badly. And then like hearing about Lexington's life, where it was like, he lived amazingly till the end of his days. He was saved in this war, like from the Civil War. Then he had like basically a life of leisure, and then like sired all of these, and then was buried kind of in state, like had this big production, and then was displayed. She just loved that it was like a happy ending for the horse, So that's one of the reasons too why she wanted to tell it.
And he was blind, stone blind. He was
Yeah,
blind. It dealt with
yeah,
But he
yeah,
was
yeah.
used as a dad. They needed him for all his children. I mean, they were unbelievable.
Well,
I
What
think
was
we're
the
about to
name of
lose Roseanne to swimming, so I'm just gonna say happy
Oh,
swimming, Roseanne.
ah,
As you can
yeah,
see.
there she is. Where are you? Where are you,
I'm
Roseanne?
I'm going to jiggle. I'm
Go
going
enjoy.
I'm
Enjoy your
going to,
jiggle.
and the reason I got cut off, I tell you, I got cut off and I'm like, what the heck? And I didn't have my reading glasses on. My phone alerted me that my phone was too hot. It's an emergency. Don't use it, and turned me off. I had no
Oh,
choice. I couldn't get you even on, even if I tried.
Well,
overcharged or something?
it's a
Well, I was
hot
sitting in the car.
conversation
I was
about
sitting in the car.
Lexington.
Oh, that's right. That's what
just
I was going to say.
my,
The conversation was getting too hot.
Are you at the
Well, no, what
aquatic
I was
center?
saying about Pryor is that he was very icky to Jared, disgustingly, and yet he was in the end of the book, he was married to a black woman, and they lived very happily married with a black lady who was
Prior.
that's what it says in the back. He was married to a black woman. This is man who was
Who?
so
Are you
poor.
talking about that was the white trainer?
Pryor
Who?
was the trainer that they said he
Yeah.
likes to be in control, and he's the one that
But this is
unfortunately.
it too, is that I don't think again that he was like the white trainer. I don't think he was such a big jerk to Jarrett. Like in a way, he's like a lesser Ten Broke character. It wasn't
Well, no,
anything
you're right.
personal against Jarrett. It was that like any success that the horse has, I want attributed to
Yes,
me.
but that's the other thing. And then the other one, Johnson, the barber, the black barber, had 16 slaves.
Mm,
That I found weird. The real barber had 16 slaves.
yeah.
I don't get that one.
my,
I,
my,
I'd
my,
like to know what happened there. I didn't know that there
my,
was so many black, very successful, free blacks who also owned slaves. I found that
Mhm.
very interesting.
Again, power, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
my
yeah.
grandfather had a
Anyways,
horse.
bye, girls.
Okay. Bye, Roseanne.
I have a good swim. Is she at the aquatic center?
Yeah.
Ah,
So my grandfather had a horse and a wagon. We called him Fertila in Yiddish, and he used to go around selling all kinds of old clothes and scrap. And I remember that I wrote a book about it called Zadie and Fertila. It's in the library. Anyway, it's an interesting thing, and I had to tell about this thing, and he had a stable, and we loved it. We loved this horse. Yes, yes, yes. So
Funny that we all have some experience with horses too. I think that it's just like mine is very tangential, but a little bit.
what was the
I
name of
wonder if
that?
that
There was a very famous movie a few years ago about a horse. Does anybody remember the
there
name
was
of
one
it?
called Secretariat. There was one called War Horse. I think that was about horses,
Maybe
a
it's
particular horse in
definitely.
the war. That one, I think I want to say that one was Steven Spielberg, but I'm not sure. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're at our time limit. So I'm going to stop the recording shortly, but before I do stop the recording, I will tell you all that our next book is A Spark of Light by Jodi Picoult.
Oh my God, I read all her books. She's terrific.
Well,
I
then
like her too.
this is what our next book is going to be, and we will be
When is it?
meeting about that. I want to say it is July 8th.
July 8th, okay. You're
Okay.
going
July 8th, yes.
July 8th. Uh-huh.
We will be talking about Spark of Light. So if you would like a copy of it, Heidi, do you want me to send you a copy?
Sweet.
Send me
I
a
will.
copy to Toronto.
Of course.
Yeah.
When are you coming?
Yes.
And I'm going to wait a
It's gonna take
second.
me a month till
Yes.
I'm going to leave it there and stop the recording and say thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording, then we can stay on and chat for a little bit longer.
Okay,
So
yes.
thank you all for coming for our discussion about Geraldine Brooks's 2022 novel Horse. It's been really fun, and we will see you next month.
Good
Bye.
choice. Okay. Yes, I'm getting the book this morning. You remember? Yes.